When the Second World War is studied, the focus tends to be on world leaders such as FDR, Churchill, and the dictator Adolf Hitler, as well as the battles fought by the Allied armies and the espionage work of the French resistance. The leader of the Free French, General de Gaulle, is largely left as a simple footnote in the world's march to victory. Born in Lille, France, on November 22, 1890, Charles-André Joseph-Marie de Gaulle, known to history simply as Charles de Gaulle, was raised in Paris. His father taught philosophy and literature as his profession. His mother, in de Gaulle's own words, was compassionate and shared a strong patriotism with her son. Though he descended from a long line of writers and historians, young Charles chose the profession in the military. He began attending St. Cyr, France's top military academy, in 1909. He graduated as a second lieutenant in 1913 and joined Philippe Pétain's 33rd Infantry Regiment. Known as a zealous soldier, de Gaulle rose through the army ranks quickly. By the time he was sent to the bloody battlefield of Verdun in 1916, he was already decorated and twice wounded. The newly minted captain was wounded a third time at Verdun and was taken as a German prisoner of war. He spent the last 32 months of World War I in 5 separate attempts of escaping his prison. It was in 1921 that Charles married Yvonne Ferndeau. Their son, Philippe, was born that same year and would go on to become a French admiral and senator. His sisters Elizabeth and Anne arrived in 1924 and 1928. Sadly, Anne, who was born with Down syndrome, died at age 20 of pneumonia. In the 1920s, Charles de Gaulle served in a French military mission on Polish soil. He became a history instructor at St. Cyr, took a 2-year course in strategy and tactics at the École Supérieure de Guerre War College. His old friend Pétain placed him on the Supreme War Council, and Charles joined the French occupation in the Rhineland from 1927 to 1922 with the rank of major and watched the Nazis build up their military in the region. De Gaulle was posted first in the Middle East for 2 years, then was promoted to a lieutenant colonel. He spent the next 4 years as a member of the Secretariat of the National Defense Council. Charles began his career as an author in 1924 with the publication of Discord Among the Enemy, which studied the difference in power between German military and civilian life. He next published his lectures on leadership under the title The Edge of the Sword in 1932, and The Army of the Future, published in 1934, de Gaulle argued for the organization of small, modern, mobile armies. In 1938, the publication of his historical study, France and Her Army, caused a rift to form between Charles and Philippe Pétain, now France's Marshal of the Army. It was not the first time that de Gaulle had faced opposition for his political views. At the outbreak of the Second World War, de Gaulle was commanding a tank brigade attached to the French Fifth Army. In May 1940, he took control of the 4th Armored Division with the rank of Brigadier General. He led his unit in a counterattack against the Nazis, but lost the attack. He ordered his men to regroup and had designs to attack the enemy with his poorly prepared unit 2 days later. But his military superiors called off the attack. After a period of political upheaval, France was settling into a new government led by Charles' ally Paul Reynaud when Hitler invaded. Reynaud dispatched Charles to England to ask Britain for military aid. Churchill made no move to help the French. De Gaulle returned home empty-handed and found the government fleeing Paris and the oncoming Nazis. Reynaud was handing control of the government to Pétain, who thought he could preserve French lives if he surrendered to the enemy. De Gaulle would not accept a Nazi occupation. He informed Reynaud that he would return to Britain to organize a French opposition to the occupation. The French politician gave the general 100,000 francs, and de Gaulle took up residence in London. He was not popular. He tirelessly fought for France, demanding that the country be treated on the same level as the other allies. His countrymen, living under the Nazis, denounced him as a traitor for deserting them. Petit's Vichy government tried him in a court and sentenced him to death in absentia, stripping him of military rank and land. FDR was not fond of his arrogance. His desire to solely control the French government in exile also did not endear him to the Allies, and Churchill was put in charge of working directly with de Gaulle, a job he did not enjoy. The French politician was not even above threatening Eisenhower, supreme head of the Allied forces, with dismissal if Ike did not liberate Paris. After the liberation of North Africa in 1943, de Gaulle moved the exiled government to Algiers. The Allied command stipulated that he was to share power with Henri Giraud, a stipulation that Charles pouted over. He quickly outed Giraud, who had ties to the Vichy government and his supporters, and returned to liberated Paris in August 1944, the savior of the French. Yet he was not invited to take part in the Potsdam and Yalta conferences, where the victorious Allies took counsel in governing the post-World War. France did secure a zone of occupation in Germany and a seat on the United Nations Security Council. Charles served as president of two successive post-war French governments. He resigned this position in January 1946 after he was not granted greater presidential power. When the French Fourth Republic was formed in 1946, de Gaulle spoke out against its new constitution. He believed it would replicate the problems faced by the Third Republic. The following year, he helped form the Rally of the French People, or the RPF. This mass movement shared his concerns about the Constitution and were fearful of French communists in the government. However, de Gaulle became disenfranchised with the movement in 1953, and the RDF disbanded in 1955. In 1955, Charles retired to his home in Colombe-les-Deux-Églises. He began to write his memoirs of the war there. The Call of Honor, 1940 through 1942, was published in 1952, followed by Unity, 1942 through 1944, and 1956, and Salvation, 1944 through 1946, and 1958. Salvation was published after his return to politics. In 1958, France and French holdings were almost ripped apart by an insurrection in Algeria. The country wanted independence, and France almost erupted into civil war because of it. De Gaulle was called upon to broker peace and independence. On June 1st, de Gaulle became prime minister, and on the 2nd began to broker the peace with the Algerian National Liberation Front, or FLN, reform the constitution, and give him the power he desired. This landed the now President de Gaulle in hot water with the secret army organization, or OAS, in Algiers. In April 1961, the OAS took the Algerian capital in a coup and threatened to take Paris. De Gaulle used the emergency powers granted by the French law to put down the rebellion, but not before bombings and assassination, a few attempts directed at him, claimed the lives of 12,000. After the Algerian independence was granted, Charles worked to strengthen the economy, reorganize the army, begin a French nuclear program, and provide the French holdings in Africa a way to become independent nations. He also worked to withdraw French military support from NATO, tried to end the Vietnam War, and bring back the glory of France. He supported the trade with European countries under Soviet control and made provincial tours across France and French-speaking countries, consolidating his power as a peacetime leader. Unfortunately, his views were not popular with his people. He was seen as anti-American. The French people did not share his view that France should be its own entity, separate from the great powers of America and the Soviet Union. In 1968, the nation devolved into the Students' and Workers' Revolt. A strike ensued, and de Gaulle had to work to keep it from destroying the country. He called for a referendum to reorganize the Senate, or his resignation. The French people voted for his resignation, and Charles de Gaulle returned to Colombe-les-Deux-Églises as Georges Pompidou, his former prime minister, took over the government. De Gaulle's second retirement was spent writing. Several of his works were published posthumously, and Memoirs of Hope, Renewal, 1958 through 1962, and Endeavour, 1962, were published in 1971, again after de Gaulle's death. Charles de Gaulle, champion of the Free French and French universal suffrage, suffered a heart attack and died on November 9, 1970. He was buried next to his daughter Anne. He was almost 80. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Thanks so much for watching!